All right. All right, welcome back. At this point, you should all have a web server running on your machine, serving up a local copy of what you have in OpenShift, right? You should all have submitted the development environment assignment last Friday, and you should be working on your first assignment on creating the form maker, and that's a project that we're going to be working on together as an assignment throughout the semester. You should also be thinking about what project you want to work on, and I'd like to go over that today. What are the expectations of that? I just want to make sure we all understand. Also, I've added a couple of things to the website where you can now go look at all the source code and of all the experiments that we've been playing around with from the beginning of the semester. All right, so let me share my screen here. So in the first assignment, user interface development assignment, you should I'm going to expand it, and it's this Google Docs. Did we go over this the final project, this document? I thought we went over a little bit. Did we go over this? We haven't, right? Not yet. Right. So this while you're working on the development of assignments, right, creating the form builder, the static pages, right, for the home page, the profile page, and all that, and a lot of you already. You should also start thinking about what it is that you want to build for your own projects. Okay, and this is a document that describes what is expected of you on that project, right? So a Google document where you're going to be describing the project that you're going to be working on, right? So the first couple paragraphs, about 200 words of description, you're going to say, what kind of problem you're trying to solve, what kind of solution you want to give it, right? In your own words, right? What is it that you're trying to build? Okay. It doesn't have to be unique. It doesn't have to be new, or it could be something that you've seen somebody do, or a website that you're thinking. And you're going to identify at least two types of people that are going to be using your application, right? We call these actors. You're going to identify two human actors, or two types of users that would be using your application. We ask you that we give you those two human actors might be, depending on the type of application that you want to build, right? For instance, if you're thinking of creating an online store, there might be those that typically you might be more familiar with the buyers, right? The buyer's experience, right? But there's also whoever sells those products also has a user interface, right? They have their own experience, right? Somebody had to put those products there for sale, right? Somebody had to add those descriptions and those prices and all those things, right? So there has to be user interfaces for both, for the buyer and the seller. Okay, so if you're doing an online store, if you're doing a online restaurant, there might be several users there as well. There might be cooks and waiters and delivery boys and receptionists. If it's an online sport, directors, spectators. This is something. If it's an online teaching, online university, you might have students, you might have faculty, staff, right? You know, if you're using Blackboard, I have a different user interface than you do, right? We have, you know, I can create quizzes, I can create assignments, I can grade them, I can have access to those things. Whereas you can take those quizzes, right? You can submit assignments, and so there's fundamentally two different user interfaces that are used by two different users, right? So for this project, we're asking you to identify two human users that would use your project, right? And describe what their goals are. Okay? So the faculty, you know, they might be teaching a course, they might be creating a course, they might be grading these goals and all these different things that users might want to do. We call them use cases. You know, what are the various goals? What are the various things or tasks that these users would like to accomplish, right? So if it's an online store, we can group these various tasks and goals by users, right? If you're a seller, then these might be your goals, right? You want to add new products, you want to update a product, you want to remove a product. You can create a product category. You can assign a product to a category. So come up with, you know, 4 or 5 use cases in a use case analysis. If you're a buyer, maybe you're searching for a product, right? Maybe you're browsing for products. You're viewing. You can add a product to a shopping cart. You can view all the products that are in your shopping cart. Those are all use cases, things users can do. Okay. The end product of your project, right? All user interfaces, all user interaction should be should be there because they're trying to fulfill any one of these user interface that is not fulfilling one of these use cases. Okay, your user interface should be driven from your use cases. So why are we building this user interface? Why are we building this? All because we want to fulfill a particular use case. Okay, all right. If you're an online project manager and you're a developer, or project manager, if you're a project manager, you might be creating tasks, you might be logging bugs, you might be assigning bugs to a developer. Right? These are the kinds of things that a project manager might want to do. And here I'm only listing a subset of use cases. Right? At the beginning, you might come up with just 4 or 5 use cases, just for this first assignment. But as you progress throughout the semester, and as you come up with the pages, what that might look like, and you start to implement, right? You might decide that it'd be nice to have, you know, this page or that page to be able to do what? Oh, be able to do something. That something should be reflected in your use cases. Make sense? Maybe you missed a use case, right? You might have to go and revisit your list of use cases, right? And add a couple or remove a couple. It says, oh, I'm not doing that use case. Instead, I'm doing these other set of use cases. Yes. So this document is somewhat of a living document, right? That's going to iterate over the semester. Okay. Right. So it's going to be your design document, your that should drive the implementation of your application. Right. If you're a developer and you're in a project management, online project management, you might be fixing a bug, or you might be closing a bug. You might be committing source code to fix a bug. If you're in an online fisherman journal, you might be creating fishing trips or adding the gear that you take with you in fishing trips, or you might be recording a particular spot, right? That you caught. You might be adding certain fish that you caught in a fishing trip. Then you're going to create a somewhat of an architecture diagram, and we'll see an example now of the various things that are being used in that project, right? The actors, the various actors are participating, right? The databases, the servers, the browsers. If you're using any third-party APIs, those should be drawn in an architecture diagram, right? With arrows on showing how the data flows from one to the other. Then you're going to create a UML class diagram, right, that captures all the various pieces of information capture. Right? If you want to represent the developer, well, you need to capture information about the developer, right? They have a first name, they have a last name, they have a username, password, maybe they have an email, phones, right? Or you're going to group those into a developer class. Right? If you're implementing, keeping track of movies or songs, whatnot, you'll need to be able to capture that information. Yes. So maybe you capture it as a class for a movie class. Right? In that class, you might have attributes such as the title, the author, how long the song is, right? If it's a movie, you might have ratings, right? When it came out, who the actors are, synopsis, a plot. You might have a URL for the poster. Yes. If it's a recipe, right? You might have a recipe. Might have a name, right? It might have ingredients, right? It might have steps to fulfill the recipe. So you'll be creating classes to capture all this information. You'll create a UML class diagram for each one of these entities, right? Pieces of information. So at least you'll need a class to capture the user or various types of users. Yes? You need a class for that. You need a class for a domain object. So domain object is a generic term that we use here to refer to any type of object that you will need for your particular project, right? So in this case, if it's a movie would be a domain object, right? So it's an object that is for your particular topic. Yes, it's an object of interest, right? That you want to keep data about. Yes, or it might be a song. That's another domain object, right? Or it might be a fish. That's a domain object. Or all domain objects. Yes, those are all things that you want to keep track of data of, right? For your particular topic. Make sense? Right? So here would be fishing trips, products, categories, sports teams, tasks, recipes. Those are all domain object. Yes? Then you need to keep track of some kind of user-to-user relationship. Maybe a user is following another user, right? Or a user is being followed by another user. Or a user sends a message to another user. A user leaves a comment for another user. Those are all user-to-user. Or a user is a manager of another user, right? Or a user reports to their manager. That's a user-user relationship. Yes. So your project needs to needs to think of some kind of user-to-user relationship. Your project should also keep track of some kind of user-to-domain object relationship between a user and various objects. So if a user likes this movie, that's a user-to-domain object relationship. Yes. Or a user left a comment on this article, or the article being the domain object, or the relationship is that a user left a comment. The comment is the relationship between a user and an article. Yes? That says this user left this comment on that article, right? That's the relationship. Then domain relationship. Domain to domain relationship. So this is relationships between objects themselves, right? Where you're creating a blog. A blog is a domain object, right? You can create many blogs. Yes. But each blog can have, correct? So the relationship between a blog and an article, that relationship we want to maintain. We want to keep some kind of relationship between a domain object and another domain object, right? Okay. And finally, relationships one-to-many and many-to-many, where something might have a one-to-many relationship with other things, such as one blog has many articles, Make sense? That's a one-to-many relationship. Okay? I like many movies. To many movies relationship. That's a one-to-many, right? But what about many, a many-to-many? Many-to-many means, an example of many-to-many is a movie might receive many comments or reviews from many reviewers. Yes? You have many reviews, many movies, correct? One movie might receive many reviews from many different reviewers. But one reviewer might be reviewing many movies. See that? So that's a many-to-many relationship. Right? So again, we want something like that. So here's a very generic class diagram of what it might look like. Okay. Again, this is very, very generic because again, I don't know what you're going to be doing for your project, right? But this should cover, I would say, 90% of whatever you're going to be building, right? If you don't follow the UML diagram, this very generic UML diagram, maybe we can play around with this, right? But let's go over it a little bit. Here we have, here's a class, right? That's keeping track, it's used for maintaining data about a user. Yes? And that user might be a buyer, a seller, a student, a faculty, an author, a player, whatever your domain is, whatever you choose, right? Whatever you choose for your project. You need two of those. Now you need a class for a buyer and maybe a class for a seller. You need two of these. Then a user might have a relationship with another user. Well, you need to keep track of that somehow, right? For that, we have another class here that can keep track information about a user related to another user. Yes? So for instance, this one over here says, right, one user associates with another user. For instance, follows is one of the simplest of relationship between a user and a user, right? One user is following another user, right? That's one of the simplest relationships. Or one user is somebody else's user manager or reports to, right? Those are all relationships between one user and another user. Right? So these two are required, right? These two classes are required. Specialization, if you've seen databases and you understand what specialization is, this is optional, right? Where you have a class, a superclass, and you might have subclasses that inherit from a superclass, right? If you've seen data models and not, you might know what that means. If you're so inclined to play around with the specialization, then go for it. But it's not required. So a user might have relationship with domain models or domain objects, right? Such as products, songs, movies, recipes, teams, books. These are all domain objects. Yes? Right? If you're a bookseller, your domain object will be your books and categories, right? Bookshelves. Right? So you'll need classes to keep track of that, right? For movies, you might be keeping track of attributes such as, again, the title, rating, when it first came out, actors, synopsis. Okay. For books, you might keep track of title, author, ISBN, right? Maybe a short description of the book. Right? So some of these objects might be related to other objects, right? Maybe this is a blog, and you might have articles, right, in that blog. So you have a domain object related to other domain objects. Right? So you would need some kind of class that keeps track of that association of one object related to other objects. Okay. Then you might have relationships between users and other objects, such as a user creates many blogs, right? A user posts many articles, bookmarks a book. a user leaves a review on a movie, right? Well, here's this one, right? User to domain allows you to keep track of relationships between users, right, and domain objects, such as the user likes a movie, or a user leaves a review on a book, or leaves a comment on a blog post, right? Okay. So this is an example of where you might get started with a UML class diagram. Okay. Very generic, but it's a start. Yeah, you'll need two of these. You probably need two of these. One for like blogs and articles, or categories and products, right? You need two of those. You'll need at least one of these, right? Likes, reviews, comments. So this might be just a little bit more spread out, right? This is very generic. If you haven't done databases or UML class diagrams, please come see me, right? I'm more than happy to spend some time with you and read all these terms, right? And we can work on it together. Okay. I have office hours later today at 1:30, so we could discuss it then if you want. All right. Wireframe. So just like for our assignments, right? Where it showed you the home page, the profile page, the login, registration page, and so on and so forth. You'll need to create some wireframes, okay, for your project. Like, what would the pages look like, right? For the various users. If you're this user, what kind of pages will you use? Right? You will have to focus first on what it would look like on a mobile. Right? What would the UI look like if I'm using a phone, right? A small screen. Okay? Once you're happy with what it looks like on a phone, then flip the phone around and say, well, what would it look like if I have a bigger screen? If I have a tablet? You know, what else could I show? Right? If I have just a bigger, a little more real estate. Okay. You'll be creating the following homepage. Again, very similar to what we have for our assignment. The homepage, login registration page, a profile, a search page, and a details page. So 5 types of pages. All right? Make sense? Any questions so far? All right, so let me talk about it a little bit more specifically as an example of what this might look like. Stop screen sharing. All right, so say you have here the user, interacting with your web application, right? And they first come in and hit your home page. Okay, in your home page, you're welcome to make it as pretty as possible, as a lot of marketing stuff in there, and put a lot of eye candy, right? So that it entices the user to stay in your web application, right? And keep using your application, right? It should be clear from the home page what it is that the application is all about, right? Maybe it could be just a paragraph underneath, or explaining what is it. Okay, it should be clear what it is that you're asking me to do. So for the home page, I should understand just by looking at the home page what is it that your application is all about. Okay, once you're in the home page, you can either from the home page or in a separate search page that you can navigate to. You should have some kind of input field where you can do a search. Okay. Once you search, you can either stay in the page, or maybe you can navigate to a separate page. That's up to you, or stay and display something like this, where you have a kind of a thumbnail and some blurb, thumbnail, text, right? Some summarized version of something. If you're looking for a movie, a book, right? This would give you maybe a thumbnail of the book, title of the book. That's it. Right? A very summarized version of what is it that you're working on. Okay, whatever topic you choose. If I click on any one of these elements, right, it'll take me to a details page. Right? Take me to a details page. And in that details page, I'll have more information, maybe more pictures, many pictures, maybe in a carousel, right? Maybe title and maybe a long description of what it is. If it's a movie, I might have also plot, right? The actors. Okay, again, depends what it is. But these are all domain objects. A movie is a domain object. A recipe is a domain object, right? These are all domain objects. And here, you might also have here reviews from various users. So a review by a user, another review by another user, right? And maybe a text area for me to add my own review, whatever that is. Okay, or maybe it allows me to like it, right, or bookmark it. I like this search result. I want to keep track of it. Okay. All this information is, so these products might be stored in the database, right? All the details might be stored in the database. The reviews might be stored in the database. Comments that you left stored in the database. If I go and I try to submit a comment or try to like something, I'll need to register, right? So for instance, if I have a collection of say movies, right? You have a collection of movies. You have movie 1, movie 2, a collection of movies or entries in a table, and I have users, right? And I have user 1, user 2, user M, and somebody likes that movie. I need to record that somehow. Yes, I need to record it, and I can either record it in a couple of ways, but typically it'll be through a many-to-many relationship. Movies or user to movie collection, saying that user 2 likes movie 3. Right? This maps elements in one of the collections to another element in another collection. Okay? This is what we're referring to as a many-to-many, right? It's a many users might like the same movie, but one movie might be liked by many users. Right? Okay, or one user might like many movies, but one movie might be liked by many users. Okay. All right. Now notice that up to this point I have not logged in yet. I haven't logged in yet. See that? So I might know what movie you clicked on. So what movie we're talking about, but I don't know what user we're talking about. See that? Up to this point, I haven't asked you to log in. So, but now that you've asked to either like it or comment, right? I need to know who you are. So if you're not logged in and you try to either bookmark it, like it, or add a comment, you will be challenged by a login. Right? I need to know who you are. You need to identify yourself. Okay? Once you log in yourself, right, then I know who the user is, and I can enter the relationship between these two. Okay? Instead of just calling a user to M, might be likes. Right? It says User 2 likes movie 3. Right? It's a relationship between this element, right, and these elements over here. Make sense? Or if you leave a comment, right, this might look a little bit like or something similar, right? You have the movies. But here's a comment table that might say, right, user 4, right, left a comment on movie 5, and here's a comment. Right? And that's a record that goes into this, right? And this relates records in the user table and relates to movies on the other table, right? You can have many entries here that maps a user to a movie and then the comment, a user to a movie and then the comment. Make sense? Right? So if I go to a movie, I would list all the comments for that particular movie by a whole bunch of users. Of those users, right? If I click on those users, I should be able to navigate to a profile page. The profile page of that user, right? So this would be maybe user 1, user 2. If I click on them, and I click on user 2, of user 2, I would see maybe their picture, some of their public information. I might see who else they're following, right? They're following other users. Who's following them? Have they left comments? What reviews have they made? Okay, all the information for that particular user. See that? Right? If I have a list of all the users that this person is following, if I click on that, I should be able to navigate to another profile page of some other user. See that? If they left a comment on a movie, if I click on that link, I should be able to navigate to the details of that particular movie, right? Because they left a comment there. Or maybe they just liked it. If I click on those, I should be able to navigate to the details page of that object. That makes sense? Yes? Okay. So you might be asking yourself, well, where do I get these movies? Where do I get the data? How do I fill up this table? What do I get the data for? I mean, users, I know how to create these, right? People are going to register in my application, and I'll have data for the various users, right? And if they create reviews, I know how to create those reviews or comments. Are they going to fill out a form? Yes? And submit those. I'm going to store them in the database. Okay. You have two options. One of the options is there's a lot of databases out there that already have a lot of data out there. Like for instance, IMDb. IMDb has, it's the Internet Movie Database, right? What you could do is, is grab, a subset of the movies, I don't know, 20 movies, and just copy yourself the data there, download it and import it here. Or, preferably, but not required, would be to use IMDb's public API. Right? IMDb provides a public API that, when you search using JavaScript, you can hit that database using Ajax and say, I'm looking for a movie that has this title, or I'm looking for a movie who's this actor played in this movie, right? And IMDb will respond with JSON, an array of JSON objects, and say, well, here they are. Here's a couple movies that match your query. And you can use that array to render this dynamically. You can render the results here dynamically. And when somebody clicks on a user, on one of these movies, and what happens here is that these movies come back with an identifier, an ID IMDb. or whatever, right? It'll come back with some kind of unique identifier that uniquely identifies that movie in that database, right? Or that sports team in that sports API, right? Or that car, right, at Edmunds, or that picture at Flickr, right? Or that recipe at Yumly, or whatever, right? Whatever piece of data, right? Whatever API that you're using, the pieces of data typically are uniquely identified by an ID. Okay? Comes back, you render it. If they click and they want to see the details of one particular element, you can use that ID, right? That comes back to me, that array. You render it. When you click on it, you can go back using that ID, go back to the API and says, hey, I want the details of that particular movie, or that particular recipe, or that particular whatever. Okay? And a bigger object comes back. A bigger object comes back that you can then render with pictures and synopses and actors and directors and whatever, right? And display the a very detailed page. Okay? That make any sense? Right? And we'll show you how to do this. It's think. Right? It's easier than you think. So locally, your movie database, your local, this would be a cache, right? This would be a subset of IMDb, right? IMDb has thousands and thousands of movies, right? Your little database will have, first it'll be empty. It'll be filled in as people start liking, start adding comments. What you'll do is you'll cache a couple of things on your local database. One of the things that you'll cache is the ID. Identifies that object in the remote database, right? With that ID, you can always go fetch the rest of the data. You can always go fetch all the pictures, all the actors, all the synopses. That's all you really need, that ID. Okay? With that ID, you can reconstruct the data to put it in your database. But I suggest you keep track of just the ID and maybe a couple of other things. Right? Maybe keep track of also a thumbnail picture. You know, if the if the database provides a thumbnail representation. And this one, it's not like you're going to download the image and store it locally in your database. Right? You'll keep track of the URL of that image where it lives on the web, right? And that URL, you'll copy it in your local cache. And you'll also maybe store a little title, maybe the title of the movie, the title of the book, right? The name of the team, or the name of the recipe, or whatever, right? And that you'll cache locally on your database, right? So that you can now enter relationships between this user likes that movie. Have that movie in your database, you're gonna first check to see if it's already there, right? If it's already there, you're not gonna cache it again. Only if it's not there would you enter it here. Okay. You can then use this relationship to build your profile, right? This user is followed by these, right? They like these movies. They create reviews on these other movies, right? Or you can use these tables, these collections, right, to build dynamically this page. That makes sense? Okay. All right. And we'll start playing around with this next week. We can go fetch data out there. So the API is not necessarily required. There's quite a few databases out there where you can download data. The FDA has some nice information. Some recipes can also be downloaded. Steam has some information that can be also downloaded. And you can upload this data in here. Okay? So I would suggest and encourage you to try and use APIs, but it's not required. Right? It's certainly much more interesting though. Any questions? Does this make sense? All right. Okay. All right. So this is due, I believe, at the same time that the first assignment is also due, the HTML assignment, the CSS assignment that you're working on, right? No? When is it due? Wait. Oh, okay. It's the week after. Yep. Okay. Thank you. All right. Good. All right. So we had started. We had started working on some experiments, and I just wanted to let you know that I've added links to that source code, the source code of what we've been playing around with for the last couple of weeks. It's now accessible through these links. So GitHub, if you go to course videos on your section, right? See, it says GitHub. If you click on GitHub, it'll take you to the source of the experiments that we've been working on for the last couple of weeks, right? If you go to public, there's this source code that I have on my machine, right? It's pushed to GitHub, so you can follow along, right? What we've been doing so far, right? If you click on public, you'll notice that, right? We have the index page that says, you know, welcome to CS4550 Spring 2015 project. This is a suggested directory structure that you should follow in your OpenShift. Right, you're going to be doing all your assignment work under here, just one directory, right, under assignment. All your project work under project, and any experiments that we've done throughout the semester, I'm putting it here. So if you go to experiments, you'll notice that these are the 5 experiments that we played around for the last couple of weeks. Yes, I think most of them were last week, weren't they? Right, we played around with dashboard. Right, we had index, and we downloaded dashboard.css. Right, we linked to Bootstrap. Right, so all that is what we did last week. So just to let you know that the source code is available. If we, remind me if example in class, just remind me to push it to GitHub so you have access to the source code. Okay. I also made a link here to the OpenShift. So this oops. Maybe the server's down. Is that not right? Oh, I tested it yesterday. I'll check that link. But it should look very similar. Does this work? Okay, it should look very similar to this, but it says, welcome to CS4550 Spring 2016, and the assignment and the project. This page, this is the landing page I keep telling you about, that this landing page for you, it should look spectacular, right? It should look, very, very polished, finished, right? That I should feel very, very proud to you, to share these links with my colleagues. Okay, and it's worth 5% of your grade. You're free to use any templates you might find, right? That look spectacular. Definitely, everything here has to be mobile friendly. Okay, I should be able to use your entire web app website using my phone. Right? There shouldn't be any weird wrappings, right? Any weird scroll bars that shouldn't be there, right? I have to pinch and zoom, right? Unless maybe it's an image or a map, right? But if it's regular content, I shouldn't have to, right? So yeah, work on that. So I'll fix that URL. All right. So this is the module we're gonna be working on for another week or so. And if you'll notice, right, we have the course map, we have the lectures, right, and the various videos, which I assume you've been watching all these videos, right? The idea would be that for you to watch these videos, come to class having watched these videos, and we can review and use what's in the videos to build something together. And the assignments, obviously, we looked at that. And here are some examples that cover the topic, that give some very simple examples that to get you going. And I'd like to go over those today. So let's start looking at these. Notice that you have a drop down that you can look at the various examples and source code for each one of these. And above is an iframe that shows the example running, and down below you have the source code you're looking at the top, right? So if we look at box, if you click here, it'll open it up. So this is the example, and what this example is illustrating is what we refer to as the box model, right? So anything that gets rendered on the window, the browser window, right, is gonna fill some rectangular area in that window. Yes, it'll have some particular width, some height. It'll have some colors maybe associated with it, the background color, maybe the foreground color. But it also we want to keep track of any spacing that might be between these rectangular areas, right? How much spacing is there between this header and this text over here? How much spacing is there between the edge of the screen and where the text begins, right? So all that, right, the position, the width, right, how the space between the white spaces, all that is referred to as the box model, right? All the data that describes how things are going to be rendered, right? And there are a couple of attributes that we can control to change the behavior and how things are rendered. So by default, we can categorize two families of behaviors on how things are rendered on the screen, right? One of them is the blocks, right? Any element that is considered to be a block. As we said last week, those take up as much space as they're given, as much width as the container gives it, and then they grow vertically, right? When they complete, they add this additional new line. The box within this area, the content inside flows from left to right and from top to bottom. And when there's no more space, it just wraps, right? And everything gets pushed down or pushed to the right or pushed to the left as things flow from top to bottom and from left to right. Now we can override that behavior using style sheets. For instance, this one, notice that it's not taking up the entire width, okay? And the normal spacing between the elements has been overwritten, right? The normal 8 pixels that appear here has been overwritten. Over here we have 50 pixels, right? None of these rectangles have any borders around it, right? Whereas this one has a really fat green border around it, solid green. The backgrounds of all of these, by default, right, is just transparent. Right? I could see, whereas over here the background is red. The text for all of these by default is black, whereas over here we have overwritten that to be white. Okay, and we've done that all through CSS. We can look at the source and how we achieve that, and we see that here we have a not fully complete HTML page. Notice that I've left out the HTML above. There's no head, there's no body, right? This is almost a snippet of HTML, right? And we're going to be using this quite a bit starting in Angular. We started to look at not full-blown HTML pages, but snippets. Snippets that eventually what we're going to do is we're going to grab all these snippets to build a bigger page, a larger dynamic page that is built out of smaller snippets. Anyway, so this snippet is declaring a couple of headers, H1s, and here box 1 and box 2. It has some just plain old text here that is not inside of any element, and we have here a div, a divider here that has a specific name of box 1, ID box 1. So it's a unique. If you'll notice at the top, we've set the attributes for that particular box. Notice as hash box 1. See that? That hash says that this maps to an ID. Right, the following name, box 1, or label, maps to some ID. This is an ID. That's what hash means. Right? It says, look for an ID labeled box 1, right? And I want to apply those rules to that box, right? To that element that matches. Right? Since this is an ID, typically, right? So this maps to just 1. In this case, it's this one right here, right? Notice that this one would behave just like everything else, right? It would just be flush to the left-hand side, flush to the right-hand side, right? And take up as much space as it needs to. But we're overriding it and says, no, we want the background to be red, right? It says background color red. The height and width have been overwritten. I want it to be exactly 500 and 200 pixels wide and high. The foreground color, I want it to be white instead of default black. The margin is the space, the white space that surrounds the content, right? Any spaces that pushes us away from anything else that we might have around us, right? It pushes us away from the left margin, right? It pushes us away from the top, anything that we might have above us. It pushes us away from anything that we might have below us. And if we had anything on the right, it would push us away from anything on the right-hand side. So just margin all by itself tells us, you know, how much white space do we want around us, right? We could be a little more specific. We could be a little more specific and just change the margin above us, below us, to the right, or to the left. Here, if you don't specify, then it's understood that we mean all around us. Okay. We are also changing the width of the border, its style, and its color. We're saying the border, the width of the border, I want it to be 50, right? So this is the width of the border, this green thing going around the content, right, comes from this. The width is 50. Here too, you can be specific, and you can say, I want the width of the top only, or the bottom, or the right, or the left. Here, since we didn't specify, it's understood that we mean the width of all the borders around us. Style, we're saying that it's solid, right? It could have been that it's dashed, right, or dotted. There's several styles of border, and we're saying that it's green, right? That's the color we chose. There's a whole bunch of well-known named colors, right? Although you can be more specific, right, and use any of 60 million colors, right, by combining the hexadecimal values of red, green, and blue. And we'll play with that a little later. Plus, we're putting some padding. So padding is white space inside the rectangle, right? So here's outside of the rectangle. Spacing outside of the rectangle, that's margin. Spacing inside of the rectangle, right, is padding, right? So we have a 50 pixel content, and finally, this is the actual content. Okay, and this is what is 500 by 200, right? The inside here, the inside content that we have here, right? What's the width of the entire rectangle? Right, that's considered to be the outer size of this huge rectangle, which needs to be calculated, right? It's what, 50 plus 50 plus 50 plus 500 plus 50 plus 50 plus 50 again, right? You can calculate that. What's the entire width of this whole rectangle? Which is down here, right? It's down here. Says that we want the background to be blue, width and height both to be 300, right? So it's a square, and the color to be white. Make sense, right? If we close this, I was looking at the source code is by saying view page source. See that? View page source. What that means is that I want to see the HTML that was downloaded from the server. Right? The actual pieces of text, the actual file that was downloaded from the server, that then my browser opened and parsed, like to render this page. Make sense? Like this is the file that was downloaded from the server. I can instead, notice there's another option. You see that other option down below? It says inspect. You see that? If you click that on inspect, the browser opens up this tool right on the right or the bottom. It just opens the tool that lets you look at how the browser interprets that file. So one thing is the little text file that was downloaded. Another thing is how the browser interprets that file. Right? It parses it and it creates its own data model, right? In RAM. Okay, it opens the file, loads it, parses it, and it creates a data model of it, right? And so this tool over here, I'm gonna put it at the bottom. This tool down here allows you to look at of how it's interpreting that document. Notice that on the document that was downloaded, we didn't have an HTML document, right? We didn't have an HTML tag. Remember that? We didn't have an open in HTML. We didn't have a head. We didn't have a body either. Remember that? But browsers are very forgiving. Right? You can have really, really screwed up HTML, right? And the browser is going to try and parse it and make sense out of it. Okay? And this is its best guess of what you meant. Right? You left out HTML. Okay, fine. I'll add it for you. All right? I know you meant it. Right? You meant to put in HTML. So this HTML. This is the domain, that is what we refer to as the object model, right? It's the object representation of the document that's being rendered, okay? And when we do JavaScript next week, we're gonna start, dynamically, programmatically, right, being able to manipulate this object, okay? I'm gonna be able to add content, remove content, hide content, change things dynamically, right? And that's how JavaScript and that's how Angular is able to, dynamically render pages, right? So this is the object model, often referred to as the DOM, right? The document object model, right? And browsers provide this tool to give you kind of like an interactive way of, looking at the model, right? So notice that if I open up the head, notice that my style tag is there. See that? That's the style tag that I wrote. To be in the head, right? It parsed it. It saw that it was just a style tag, and it says, "Oh, I know where this goes. It goes in the head tag, right?" It put it in the right place. What about the body? I didn't have a body. I don't believe so. Let me see. We can always look at the source code, right? The source code. This is a source code. Notice I don't have a body here. I don't have a head either. I don't have HTML. See that? My parser is a very good parser. It knows how to interpret the content. So all the content was put in the body. The H1 was put there. All my text was put there. The div was put in there. Text, other headers were put there. Everything's there. See that? As I hover over the content, the browser tells me, you're hovering, over this. It highlights it at the top. See that? It highlights it. It says, this is my graphical representation of that piece of text. Now, that is how I interpret it, and it renders it at the above it. See that? If I click on it, it tells me on the right-hand side what kind of styling is it applying to. It's an H1. See that H1? We know that bold, it's big text, right? We know that. Well, the way it achieves it is that the browser has its own style sheet. It has a default style sheet, right? That whenever it sees H1, this is how it's rendering it, right? It's rendering it, the size of the font weight, it's bold, okay? It applies certain margins above and below, okay? Some spacing before and after. So before and after, right, it's adding some padding, which when I hover over it, you see the blue, you see the orange, right? The blue means that's the main content, right? That's the main block content. That's where the main content goes. The orange is padding or margins, right? That is white space, right? That content is not rendering any content there. It's just white space that adds space before and after. Make sense? Right? If I hover over the divs, if I hover over div, notice the div here. If I click on it, notice that it highlights several things out here. See that? Right, notice that it has some oranges, some greens, some reds, right? It's kind of highlighting different things. it says this div is it's taking up this entire space above here, right? We can make this maybe we can pop it out. There it is. So if I hover, notice that it's highlighting this entire area. It says this is the entire space I'm taking up because of that div. If I click on it, it says, notice at the bottom, right, or on the side, it shows the styles that are being applied to that rectangular area, right? Notice that, and notice it's what I wrote, right? It's the style that I wrote on the on my text file. Yes, it's a text file. It's red. It's the width and the height, the color, and I can play around with this. I can play around with this live. Maybe the background color, I want it to be gray, right? And the foreground, right? I want it to be red, right? So I can look at the style live on the page, right? And designers take this tool very often, right, to see the pages live, right, and play around with the style. And once they're happy with the style, they copy these attributes, go back to their CSS files, right, and paste those styles there, because they can see the page live, right, and play around with it. Border color, I can change the border color, right? I can change it to beige, no, beige, or I can say it was green, right? I can change it to red, right? I can change the style instead of solid, or I can change to something else. Right, there's a whole bunch of styles that I can use: double, groove, hidden, inherit, inset, no border. Okay, ridge. Okay, there's a whole bunch of styles that I can take a look at. Right, if I like it, I can copy this and go back to my source code and paste it there. Okay, so this is a great tool that you can use. We're going to use this tool quite a lot throughout the semester. It's later on when we start playing on JavaScript. This is going to allow us to step through our JavaScript. You know, how the JavaScript is actually running inside of our page. We'll be able to put breakpoints and look at the variable values as we step through the code. Very, very powerful. Okay, make sense? Everybody okay? All right. And the way you bring it out is you say right-click and inspect. All right. Notice that if I reload the page, all my any source code, although Chrome has a tool, right? Chrome has a tool that will connect to the source file, and any modifications you do live, right, on the browser, you can go back and save it into source code, which is pretty cool. But you have to be careful there, right? You're modifying real source code. All right, so that's our first example. Any questions there? Pretty easy stuff, right? This is all easy. I just wanted to introduce the tool and how you can use it to look at these various. Why is this so slow? So this is just real quick showing an example of centering content. And we look at we can inspect this and we see how we're achieving this. Right, and notice that we have a single div. Using these two attributes. One of them is giving it a width, right? So we can deliberately choose what the width of our content is going to be. Over here, we chose it to be 600 pixels wide, right? And notice it actually tells us where it's grabbing that. It's grabbing it from our page called center.html from the second line. I grabbed this styling from there, and I can remove the width. I can highlight or apply it, but to achieve the centering, let me make this a little smaller. All right, so to achieve the centering, in addition to the width, we add this margin. We add margin. Okay, and we say I want margins. Right, I'm not going to explicitly tell you that I want 50 pixels or 200 pixels. Right. I want the browser to automatically calculate what the margins should be, right? So that these two rules can take into effect. One rule, I want this to be 600. And I want a margin. Everything else, I want it to be a margin. That's basically what I'm saying, right? Choose a default width for my content. Everything else, I want a margin. I want you to automatically add margins to either side. See that? That's what this margin auto does, right? It adds this white space on the left and white space on the right. Okay, and as I resize, notice that my content is always centered, right? Right, and this you have this margin. You can say you can center it. Notice that it's all centered now, right? The div is centered plus the content inside is centered, right? We can change it to something else. We can say that it's left, so that's the default, so that no change there. Or we can say right, so it justifies it to the right, right? Or you can justify it, say justify, meaning it's flush on the left and flush on the right, which gives a nice clean. Another one here is a class and ID. I think we've done that already, right? Classes and ID. The only thing that I wanted to point out here is that the style in the body, we have one H1, there it is, but there's two styles that are competing over how this should look, right? Notice that I have two styles here. One says that H1 with the class blue, which it does, right? Here it is, H1 with class blue color, should have color blue. But this one says that H1, the same H1, should have the color red. And notice that it's striped. See that? That means that these two rules were competing for the same H1, right? One was saying that one should be red, and the other one was saying that the other one should be blue. But one beat the other. Okay, and that's what I wanted to point out, right? Why not red? Why blue? Right? Well, it'll happen oftentimes that you'll be loading CSS from various places, right? Your CSS, Bootstrap CSS, right? From several places. Oftentimes will happen that you'll have different rules vying to control the same rectangular space, the same elements that apply to the same element. So there has to be a rule by which we decide one over the other, right? And the rule typically is based on specificity. You know, how specific is the rule, right? What is the narrowest scope that a rule is referring to? Okay. So between these two rules, notice that this one is more broad. This is much broader than this one, right? It's about all H1 on the page, yes? Whereas H1 dot blue color is referring to that subset of H1 that have a class blue color. See that? That's what the dot means. Dot refers to a class. Right? So blue color is a class on H1, right? Which there is, right? In the HTML, we have H1, and then we have the class blue color. So this one refers to a subset of the larger one. You see that? This one talks about all H1. This one talks about a more specific H1. So because it is more specific, then that rule takes precedence. Make sense? Right? And you know, if you're going to web development, you'll be dealing with this day in and day out. Right? You have all these classes and they're competing, and you'll try to minimize the collisions. Right? You try not to have these collisions, but it's inevitable, especially if you're using style sheets, somebody else's style sheets, right? Bootstrap. You can't control the Bootstrap style sheet, right? It's somebody else's style sheet, right? You'll need to override it. You need to override and say, well, no, I don't want the way. I don't like the the highlight of this, or you don't like the rounded corners here and there. You'll need to highlight override it. And the way you override it is like this, using precedence. Okay. Here you have IDs. And H1, again, you have several rules that want to apply styling on that one H1. You have one, notice that H1 has an ID associated with it, and it has a class associated with it. You see that? It has an ID, head, and it has a class, blue color. So here's a rule that says, hey, find me an H1 whose ID is head. I want the foreground color to be yellow. That's what that rule says, right? Hash is for ID, right? Periods are for classes, and hashes are for ID. This says H1 that has an ID head. I want the foreground color to be blue, to be yellow. The second rule says, find me an H1 whose class is blue color. I want the foreground to be blue. Yeah? Well, here we have an H1 that has both. It has the ID head and it has the class blue color. You see that? Which one is more specific? Right? Well, classes can apply to many elements. The same class applies to many elements. Right? Whereas ID, presumably, is meant for a very unique element. See that? And because of this, IDs take precedence over classes, right? Because IDs would be a subset, right, of a larger group, right, of elements. Right? IDs are unique, so IDs take precedence. Right? So notice that this goes from H1. See H1 over here? That's a very broad rule. I want all H1s, right? This one is more specific. I want those H1s who have this class. Whereas this is very, very specific. I want the one H1. So that's why it overrules. What if they all said H1? Right? If they all have H1, one says it's blue, the other one says red, the other one says yellow, which one would win? Right? Well, if you can't tell because of specificity, right? IDs or classes, right? Then document order takes precedence, right? In the order in which they were declared. And basically, it's last one wins, right? The last one that says anything about H1 is the one that wins. Right? So last one defines the previous ones. Make sense? Okay. And basically, the closer it is in the document, the closer a style is to its element, right? The higher its precedence, right? Okay. All right. IDs, inheritance. Also, if you have elements that include other elements, like for instance, over here we have a paragraph. Use a paragraph. There's highlighting right there, right? A paragraph that includes a B, right? A bold element under there. You see that? So here's the entire paragraph, but here's the bold element right here, this one right here, right? So by default, the including elements, right? So this bold, if the parent says that the color should be blue, then the child, the one that's inside, would also be blue, okay? So that's what we mean by inheritance. But children are free to override their parents, as they often do. So you have here, parent says that I want you to be blue, right? So I'm highlighting this. I'm highlighting this B, right? It says, my parent tells me to be blue, right? All paragraphs should be blue. But there's another style that says that bolded elements should be red, right? With a background, with a green background. See that? Right? Because again, this hierarchy of elements, right? You can create hierarchies of your paragraphs and include other elements and include other elements and include other elements, right? The narrower and narrower you get to the scope, right, the more specific you are, right? The paragraph includes tons of elements, might include tons of elements, right? But the narrower you get in the hierarchy, you might be talking about specific elements. This rule is more specific than the higher level key. Inline. So here you have an element in the bottom that is being styled with H1. Okay, and notice that the tag, right, we want to style using an ID. Notice it has an ID head. There it is. By ID, we want to style it as yellow. By class, we want to style it as blue. By name, H1, we want to style it as red. But none of them work. It turns out that it's green. All right? And the way it's achieved is by using this style attribute. See the style attributes, right? This one is taking precedence over all of them. It's taking precedence over the ID, the class, the name, right? And the reason is because it's the closest, right? By scope, right? It's the closest to the element. It's right on the element. It's declared right on the element. And it's ignoring everybody else. It's ignoring the classes, the IDs, right? Because it's so close to the element. It's declared right on the element. It says the color should be green. I don't care what anybody else out from here. Right, everybody else. Make sense? Not that you should. Not that you should use the style element. I do not want to see any style elements or style attributes in your source code. So that's referred to inline styling, which you should avoid. Instead, everything should be links. All your styles should be through links, right? Remember we used link last week. Link, and you give it the href location of a style sheet, right? All your styling should be through links. And let's look at an example here. Here we have two headers, right? We have two headers and a couple paragraphs. We can look at the body, and then we have H1 there. There it is. We can look at the paragraph. We can have the H2 right there. Notice how it highlights on the left-hand side, right? So we know exactly what everything refers to. We have P there. Okay, so let's look at the styling. So the styling is coming from two links. There they are. Two links, right? That are referring to style sheet 1 and style sheet 2, right? And even here, the precedence and the scoping, all those rules still apply. Okay. Also, notice how they've been declared. First, we load style 1, yes, and then we load style 2. See that? Right. Well, because of the order in which they were loaded, style 2, because it gets loaded later, takes precedence over style 1. So if there's any collision, if there's any ambiguity about the rules, right? Style 1, right? So let's look at style 1. We can look at it here. Here's the source code for everything that we've loaded. Here's the HTML document, right? Here's the two style sheets, style 1 and style 2. We can look at it. Notice the style 1, all header 1 should be beige. The background should be beige. But style 2 says that the background of H1 should be red. See that? There's an ambiguity. Which one do I do? Well, if I look at the documents, we'll notice that style sheet 2 is loaded after style 1. That means that style 2 takes precedence, right? So whatever I declare in style 2 overrules style 1, right? So we have style 2 says that the header should be red. That is why it's red, where the other one says it should be beige. Make sense? So style 2 says header 2 is green. And there it is, it's green. And style 1 says that all the paragraphs should be blue. It doesn't collide with any styles and rules in style 2. So that's why the paragraphs are blue. Okay? All right. Okay. Position. So as the browser parses the HTML, it creates of blocks or inlines, right? Blocks take up the entire page, right? They add vertical spacing, whereas inlines just flow from left to right with the rest of the content. Yes, and it follows these two basic rules to determine where everything is going to end up on the page, right? One way, and paragraphs, and divs, and bullets, and all these, right? It follows these two basic policies, right? Blocks and inlines. And everything just rows from left to right, from top to bottom, and filling out the page as it goes, right? Now, we can override that default behavior, that default rules. You know, it says, no, I don't want to use the default rendering, right? And I can override that, again, using style sheets, okay? If you notice, in this example, notice that we have this kind of like floating rectangle, blue rectangle floating on top of this other content. You see that? Right? Notice that the content around it, it's not flowing around it. It's just being like overlaid on top, right? So it looks like there's actually content behind the blue. It's not like it's routing on me, right? I'm just on top of it, right? So this is breaking the default behavior of rendering from left to right and then just flowing with the content, right? Let's look at the content. Right? If we look at the HTML, we'll see that we have some style here. We have box 1 is being styled. And nothing else. Let's see. We have two divs, right? One div is called box 1, and the other one is called box 2. See that? And there's two style. There's a style up here that is only styling one of them. It's only styling box 1, but it's not styling box 2. So box 2 should behave the default way, right? It's just a block element, right? It takes up the entire width of the page, right? The content inside behaves inline, right? Flowing from left to right, from top to bottom. If it doesn't fit, it wraps. And also the div, at the end of the div, it just adds a new space. But notice the way you should render this, right? Box 1, notice that the background color is blue. See that box 1, right above it? So here's box 1, and it says that the background is blue. So we're talking about this guy here, right? Right? So by default, it should have rendered how? First the blue, right, taking up the entire width of the page, followed by something below it, right? Should be followed. But instead, notice that a box 2, where is it? It starts up here. Nothing is pushing it down. Like box 1 somehow, was removed, right? It's not occupying second box down. You see that? Right? The reason is that box 1, this one at the top, this one, right? Notice if we go to the elements, we go to the elements. This is box 1. See that it highlights box 1? Box 2, box 1. See that? If we click on box 1, we'll notice that it's using a position attribute. The position attribute says, But don't use the default algorithm to calculate where my position is. Right? That position is calculated by the browser using the block and inline algorithm, right? The blocks all the way, add vertical, blah, 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 yes? Inline flow from left to right, from top to bottom, and they wrap. This one says, don't use that algorithm. Instead, I want to use an absolute policy, right? I want to be absolutely positioned. I want to tell you exactly where I want to show up, where I want to render. I want to render 50 pixels from the top, and I want to render 50 pixels from the left. Okay? Also, I don't want you to calculate my width, right, and my height. Notice that by default, the width and the height is calculated by the browser, right? If it doesn't fit, it just grows in height. Yes? If it doesn't fit in width, it just becomes narrower. You see that? That's the default width and height. Here, we're overriding that. We're saying, no, 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 no. I will give you the width and the height. I will give you the position of where to exactly position me. You see that? We're overriding that default behavior. So the browser, what it does is says, okay, fine, since you're not going to play by the normal rules, I can't use you to calculate the position. To be pushed down, depending on your height. Yes? But since you're overriding that, I'm just not going to use you at all. That's why the background here renders, or the background in the back here, renders as if div 1 doesn't even exist. Okay? And div 1, I mean the box 1 just is overlaid on top because of the position. Make sense? Everybody good? Right. Notice that here I can play around with the content and the attributes and right, if to be positioned exactly this particular area, I can just copy from here. One other thing is that you notice that the box 1 scrolls. See that? It scrolls with the content, right? So it's actually, its position is relative to the page. Right, if the page moves, it moves with it, right? As opposed to if I come here and say that it's not absolute, it's fixed, right? If I say if it's fixed, I come back now and notice that if I scroll the page, right, the box doesn't scroll with it. Of the window, the document, you see that, right? So there's many ways that you can configure the position, its behavior, of how things get positioned on screen. Okay. Sticky. So sticky, this example illustrates how we can position things and have it stick to that position, right? So not move. This is very common in some websites, especially in mobile applications. Where you want to have maybe a fixed header or maybe a fixed footer at the bottom, and even though it might scroll up and down, right? We want to have the header always available to us so we can very quickly go maybe to a menu or jump around. And so notice that the content, right? If I make this a little smaller, notice that even though the main content scrolls, right? The header stays put and the footer stays put, right? And the way we achieve that is with what we used earlier, right? The fixed position, right? Right. So let's look at that. Let's look at let's inspect. Look at the content. And I'm gonna stick it to the right-hand side, and we'll see the content here. We'll call it the head. We have the style. And we are declaring 2 styles here. We're declaring one called sticky, and the other one's called sticky. A better name for this might be the first one is being applied to the header, and the second one is being applied to the footer, right? And we're also styling the body. What body is that? It's our body elements. It's the entire body, right, of the document. And then in there we have The header at the top, notice I'm highlighting it. See that? It's that header at the top, right? And down below, we have the footer, right? If I highlight it, notice that the footer is being highlighted. See that? Okay. They both are using, notice, position fixed. See that? Position fixed and position fixed over here. Elements. And let me highlight the header. Notice that the header, we have this sticky, dot sticky, right? It's applying to this class here, right? Dot sticky, this class. We said that the background is black, right? Yeah, exactly, it's black. The foreground is white. The position is fixed, right? That's why it doesn't move when I scroll. And notice that I'm saying that I want the top of this div to be stuck to the zero position, the Y zero position, top zero, top equals 0, right? That's why it's stuck at the top, right? My left and right, I also want to stick my left all the way to the left, right? So it's flush with the left-hand side, and my right is also flush with the right-hand side, right? So I'm kind of stretching this left and right and top, sticking it to the bottom, to the top, sorry. What about the bottom? What about the bottom here? I didn't say what to do, okay? So the top is definitely stuck up here at 0. The left is definitely stuck here to 0, and the right-hand side is also stuck to the right-hand side. But the bottom, notice that it's free to grow and shrink. See that? See how it grows? It gets bigger and bigger. Grows bigger and bigger. Maybe we don't want that, right? If it's a header, typically we don't want that, right? We want the header to be of a particular height, right, and not change, right? Notice also what's happening to the content below. So this content over here. See, as the header becomes smaller and smaller, notice what's happening. It's overlapping on top of the main content. You see that? Right? Well, actually, this was already overlapping, even when I wasn't making it so small. That we added to the body, we added a padding. We added this padding. We're pushing the entire body content down. If we wouldn't have done that, if I remove that styling, if I remove it, notice what happens to the content, to this main content. If we remove this, it goes up. Alt rendering, right? The body would have been overlapped with the, right? With the div, with the header on top of it. See that? That's not acceptable. So what we do, because we know that we're going to have a header there, and we don't want anything under the header, right? We're just going to push the entire. Here I'm putting 100. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it would have been better, you know, maybe a little less, like right there, maybe. Okay. What should it be? How high should this be? What would this be? It should be as much as the height of the header, but my header doesn't have a height. My header doesn't have a height. Actually, it's changing all the time, right? As this becomes smaller and smaller. That's unacceptable. So if we go to sticky, what we could do, let me change the foreground color to be something else. Maybe make it red. Okay. Notice that right, it's as I change it, right, it grows. What we might want to do is say, no, I want to have a height and not have it change all the time, right? So I'm going to make a height 75 pixels. Okay. Now what happens? They get smaller and smaller and smaller. Let's see, when the content doesn't fit, what happens? Notice the content. What's it doing? It's spilling over, right? The black background is not increasing, right? It's staying at 75 pixels. Yes? But look at the content spilling over, right? It's overflowing out of the container, right? We can control the loop. We can say, hey, if you overflow, if there's any overflow of the content, we might decide what to do. We could say what? What could we say? We could say add a scroll bar, right? And notice the scroll bar now, right? This is a scroll bar that allows me to scroll the header, right? You see that? It says if you can't fit, add a scroll bar, right? So meaning if I make this bigger and bigger and bigger, and the content does fit, notice that the scroll bar goes away, right? And I have enough space. I don't need the scroll bar. The scroll bar goes away. But as it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, it doesn't fit, and you have this scroll bar, right? Notice that if I make it even smaller, even the main content doesn't fit. So I have this double scroll bar. No, don't ever use double scroll bars. Maybe for super user, maybe for very special use case. But in general, as a rule of thumb, avoid double scroll bars, right? It confuses users. So anyway, so that's not acceptable. What could we do instead? The body, sticky, we said scroll bars. A better solution would be to make this hidden. Just, what this says is just clip it, right? If the content doesn't fit, just clip the content. Don't show it, right? Don't make it spill over, right? Right. So what we had originally was this, right? No overflow and no height. So it was increasing like this. See, when it doesn't fit, you have to be careful because the bootstrap headers behave this way, right? If you make your screen too small, right, and the content that you have in your header doesn't fit, it'll start wrapping, and the header will grow, right? It'll go on top of your main content. That would be unacceptable, right? Make sure that you go back and visit your content, and you're always doing this, right? You're resizing your content, making sure that at any width, right, your content looks nice, right? That you don't have any weird wrappings, you don't have any weird resizing of divs because the content doesn't fit, right? Always does it smoothly, right? Adapt. Does it smoothly respond? Is it responsive, right? Does it smoothly respond to the width of the page? So yeah, so you might want to do, one of the first things you might do and override your bootstrap is to go here and put overflow hidden, right? So and add a height so it does not spill over. Even if a button might disappear, at least you're not spilling over or resizing this. Anyway, since we make the height 75, the body should also be 75 or thereabouts. Right? Makes sense? Make the height of the header 75. We're pushing the entire content 75, right? So that it shows below the header. Okay? All right. Sticky. Z-index. So Z-index allows us to render things in front of each other, right? Typically, you don't need the Z-index, right? Because nothing normally would be on top of anything, right? Everything would just flow from top to bottom, from left to right, right? There's no need for the Z-index. But when you start overriding the default behavior by providing a particular position and height and width, you're overriding the behavior and you're positioning things that might be on. And so now, right, what used to be just a width and a height issue now also becomes a depth issue, right? So you can override what things fall on top of each other by using the Z-index attribute. So in box 3, which is red. Now normally the order in which elements are declared it determines who gets rendered in which order, right? So box 1 gets rendered first, yellow. Box 2 gets rendered second, blue. So it makes sense that rendered on top of all the other ones because it's the last one. It's the last one to get rendered, right? But we have overwritten that, right? If we go here and highlight box 1 and box 2, notice that they both have Z-index equal to 2. Z-index equal to 2. So we have overwritten its depth, right? By default, they're all 0, right? We've made these two equal to 2. So because they have the same Z-index, they render in the order that they're supposed to, right? Blue gets rendered last, so it's on top of yellow. That we're saying, hey, no, Z index is below the other two, which have Z index of 2, right? So that's why it renders below all the other ones, when by default it would render on top. Okay. All right. Let's leave it here. Go over the last couple of experiments. Come back on Thursday. All right. Thank you. And I have office hours now at 1:30 if you want to come and we can chat.